Let me know when the participants are ready.
Yeah, sure, sir. Okay. Good morning, participants. Data is one of the important feature of every organization because it helps business leaders to make decisions based on facts, statistical numbers, and the trends. Due to this growing scope of data and data science come in the picture, which is a multidisciplinary field. Many e-commerce websites like Amazon, Myntra uses the behavior of customer, which they can analyze for the data received from the user end, and this analysis of the data is nothing but the data science. So, to hear more about the need and the importance of the data science, application of data science in real life today, we have Mr. Satish Ranade with us. He is having more than 35 plus years of experience in IT field. He he also delivered many sessions on to industrialists as well as academics on this mentioned field. He is having great experience working in the field of data science. So let's hear Mr. Ranade. So I would like to hand over the session to Satish Ranade, sir. Sir, you please continue with this session.
Okay. Thank you, madam. And I hope I am audible and you
So
are also able to see my screen, right?
yes, sir.
And you are able to see my presentation as well.
Yes, sir. Your presentation is also visible.
Okay, great. So good morning, everybody. I know you had just heard Dr. Deepak Shikarpur's session about, what is the future of 2021. And, one of the aspects I'm sure he must have touched about the disruptive technologies, and particularly among the disruptive technologies, the data science as, one of the key factors that is going to change the world. So to understand really what is data science, essentially, what is science behind it, why it is important, and then, really what are the real life applications that either you and me are part of it, they are designed for it, or you and me can later on design for the larger benefit of society and industry. So my overall 1.5 hour session is split into two parts. First part is to understand, what is data science, and second part is to see how it is applied. So with that brief introduction, let me start my presentation. So first part, what is data science? My entire background is that I have spent almost 40 years in information technology. However, the world we see today is very, very different from what I have seen over past 40 years. We call this as a VUCA world. VUCA is an acronym of volatile. V stands for volatile, U stands for uncertain, C stands for complex, and A stands for ambiguous. So that means, overall, the challenges of business, challenges of industry, challenges of your academics are so many that everything is uncertain, volatile, ambiguous, very complex. So for example, your normal banking transaction was you go to a bank, give them a withdrawal slip, withdraw cash. Now you have an ATM at your doorstep. But do you know how the ATM works? The data generated through ATM, what happens to that? So this is why, things are becoming more and more complex. Why data is so important? Because researchers are trying to understand what are the customer preferences, because they are the ones who will understand what's happening in the society, what are the consumer preferences, how are their behaviors, how will they react, what are their sentiments, and essentially give that input to the enterprises which are going to manufacture products or provide services. So for example, the latest trend, I was talking to one of my friend who runs what we call as consumer durables or fast moving goods shop in a popular society, in a popular area in Pune. Now he was telling me in our informal conversation that the dishwasher, particularly in Pune, the dishwasher earlier demand was like 4 to 5 dishwashers in a year, and now the demand is 1 dishwasher per week. So almost 13 to 14 times more than what it was before pandemic. And therefore, and the Bosch dishwasher is the most popular one. And if you book today, there is a 8 months waiting time to get the Bosch machine. Now just imagine if this researcher would have done some data science work and provided this insight or the consumer preference to go for dishwasher, let's say a year back, to Bosch machine or to any other dishwasher manufacturer, they would have been ready with their stocks, they would have been ready with their sales network, service network, and two things would have happened. The enterprise would have made much more sale. So today they are actually losing customers to other suppliers, and even consumer would have been happy. Having said that, this was very difficult to predict, but this is what the researchers are trying to do. Leave aside pandemic, but without pandemic, what is likely to happen? The second part of the overall ecosystem is the policymakers, like state government, local municipality, central government, and various other policy making bodies, like from an academics perspective, it is UGC or AICTE and so on and so forth. So they actually want to know what are the trends, so that they ensure that they avoid any possible future malpractices and the consumer interests are protected. The third entity in the ecosystem is again regulators. They have very similar role because they go hand in hand with policymakers. What policymakers do, regulators ensure that those are translated into rules and regulations, and they are followed by all the goods and service providers. And the fourth entity, most important entity of this ecosystem, is the enterprises, who are really running businesses, and obviously their only motto is to increase revenue and to increase profit. Now all of them need data to understand their respective demands in terms of what is likely to happen in a volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous world. And therefore data is becoming very important, because data is something that is showing them these preferences, these trends, the consumer behavior, and the opportunities to increase revenue. And that's why data is being sold. You may not be aware, but data is actually sold. And you must have seen a lot of news items in the daily newspapers about data protection, Facebook doing that, Instagram doing this, WhatsApp agreeing, not agreeing for data. And that is all because data is so important. So today data is actually getting a status of oil, which is one of the essentials to run the world. And data is like becoming the oil of the new world, or the oil of the digital world. You can stop me at any point of time by unmuting yourself and ask questions. There is going to be a question answer session at the end, but feel free to ask at any point of time. So then let's look at what are the types of data. So basically there are three types of data: structured data, unstructured data, and semi-structured data. Now, as you know, most of us are familiar with structured data because it is quite common in use and it has certain definitive characteristics. So what are these characteristics? It has a fixed format, it is alphanumeric in nature, can be easily handled by machines, and has definitive common property. So if you look at an example that I have put here, it's a simple spreadsheet. So what is it showing? It is showing you a customer number, customer name, account number, amount debited, and the date of transaction. So if you look at this data, this is simple, easy to understand, very well formatted. There are rows and columns. It doesn't have anything other than alphanumeric values and can be easily processed by tools like spreadsheet. So if you ask me what is the total debit amount, I know all of us know that you have a function called sum in spreadsheet, and you can actually sum it and say, okay, it is 1234.80. And it also has a definitive common property. So this data pertains to customer debit transaction. So if you are using debit cards, so what is the common property? The common property is it is a debit transaction list for all the customers who have probably done transactions in a particular month, on a particular day, or in a particular week. So there is a definitive common property, and we understand all this because even your simple mark sheet is nothing but a very structured data. What does it contain? It contains the subject code. It obviously it contains the name of the student, registration number, subject code, marks obtained, and the class. Very simple structured data format. While the challenges start coming in when you start looking at unstructured data. The characteristics of unstructured data is contrary to the fixed format. It has no predetermined format. It can come in numbers, text, images, voice clips, video clips. So any form of data can come in the unstructured data category. It is difficult to store and process because of the variety of data types. It is very difficult, and the mechanisms to store data from the past experience are showing their own limitations to store this kind of variety of data, and therefore it is becoming more and more difficult to store data. Also, the kind of volume that are getting generated are unheard of, and the overall infrastructure for data storage is so limited that they are facing challenges because of the volume, and we will see more details in the coming slides. And lastly, may have common subject but not property. So if you look at now, there is a screenshot of some conversation, WhatsApp conversation, and you will figure out that it exactly follows what is called as unstructured data. So there is no predetermined format. Somebody is writing text and somebody is showing an emoji. Somebody will then attach a voice clip. Somebody will attach a video clip. And maybe you start your conversation in terms of what is likely to be the one-day team for today's match. And suddenly somebody said, you know what, but in T20, Virat is the best. So the conversation will suddenly move from one day to T20. So even there is no predetermined common subject. There is no common subject. Suddenly someone say, guys, stop this. We are in a serious corona situation. Why are you talking about cricket? Then there will be comments about corona. However, it has just one, there is no common subject and no common property. Now, this is a group of people, this could be students, this could be your set of friends from different colleges, or this could be a combination of your relatives who are placed, at different places. And this kind of data becomes extremely difficult to handle. And that is why data science is getting more and more important. The third type, which is the combination of two, structured data and unstructured data, is semi-structured data. So it has, the commonality between structured data in terms of it has the, certain structure, fixed format, but it is not like an Excel spreadsheet. It is separated by some tags. So for example, if you have logs, if you are students from mechanical engineering or electronics or any faculty, you will know that machines create logs. If it is a computer server, it will create log. If it is a thermostat, it will create a log in terms of how it is logging temperatures and so on. So there is a continuous data stream that is available. It is separated by tags, and there is a common property, but they are not in a predefined format. And therefore, the semi-structured data becomes a combination of structured data and unstructured data. Yes, any question? Okay. I talked about volumes, right? So you see this graph, which is done by, produced by the research wing of IBM. That since 1980 till 2020, that is last year, what has been the data growth? And if you really see, the structured data, which is the lighter blue color, is fairly steady, it's straight line. While if you see the growth in the unstructured data, it is absolutely logarithmic. And out of the total data that is generated and stored, 80% of the data is in unstructured format. And obviously, if you look simply at your WhatsApp, you will get, if somebody has a good camera and if he sends you a couple of photographs, it will be easily 10 MB size. So if you really look at the data that is getting generated in the form of unstructured data is huge. And therefore, the real worry about why the original ways of processing data were inadequate is because of this humongous growth and the types of data. So we saw that, there are images, there are emojis, there are video clips, audio clips, unstructured text, and so on. So when we look at, I understood that this is so much of a growth, but tell me who is creating this data and why there is such a growth. So if you look at the right-hand side of my slide, it talks about, first thing talks about the structured data, which are the business transactions. So New York Stock Exchange generates about 1 terabyte of 1 TB of new trade data per day. So just imagine New York Stock Exchange runs, for 250 days a year. So it is creating 250 terabytes of a data. As per the US regulations and even Indian regulations, the data has to be stored for 7 years. So you have to store this data, 250 terabyte multiplied by 7, right? So you go into petabyte. So just one stock exchange in the world is creating more than a petabyte of data to be stored and processed. Now you see, you have so many exchanges. You have Japanese Nikkei, you have Bombay Stock Exchange, you have Hong Kong, you have Singapore. There are probably 100 stock exchanges across the world who do serious transactions. So all of them put together would easily generate 1 petabyte of data every day. So that means at the end of the year, it is 250 petabytes of data and multiplied by 7 years. So it is even going beyond the petabytes. We are still okay with that. And I'll tell you how in the next slide. But let us look at the real problem, which is social media. So all of us will see that, 1 terabyte of data, huge volume. While when you look at the social media actually creates 500 terabytes of new data every day. And what is the social media? Obviously, the Facebooks, the Instagram, the WhatsApp, and various other social media platforms. Right? Now, if you look at 1 versus 500 terabytes of data every day, and that too not being able to process so easily as we are able to process the business transactions. So therefore, this social media data, 500 terabytes, is becoming a huge problem. Then even beyond that is the IoT devices. So I will say, okay, 1 terabyte structured data, no problem, fine, we know how to process it. Then we have 5 terabytes of data, I'd say, okay, even that is okay, we can somehow manage. But now that the IoT devices are coming, and typically, if you see the jet engine, all of us are familiar with the concept of black box, which stores a lot of data about the flight. But that is just minuscule. With the introduction of IoT devices, one jet engine will produce 10 terabytes of data only in 30 minutes of flying. So imagine one jet engine, which is one plane. If one plane runs probably for 16 hours of a day, which means it is creating 1 hour, it creates 20 terabytes of data. In 16 hours, it will create 30 to 320 terabytes of data. Now this is just one jet engine. Imagine how many jet engines, that is jet planes, are there in the world and how much data they will generate. And this data being stored, being processed, being used, these are the data sizes that are causing significant problems. So these are some of the key data producers in the world which are creating data from which people are trying to draw meaningful insights. So I talked about structured data, right? And I also said that there are absolutely no issues with structured data. Even if it is 1 terabyte with one exchange, that is fine, because typically mostly the data will be in row by column format. It will be in the form of transactions. Even if I'm generating 1 terabyte of data, what is the New York Stock Exchange data will consist of? It will consist of the stock ID, that is the company name, the buyer, the seller, the quantity at which it is bought, the quantity that is bought, the price at which it is bought, the price at which it is sold, so on and so forth, the bank details. But it is all still structured alphanumeric processable data. If there are small volumes of data row by column, all of us know we can easily process in Excel. However, for the large volumes, there have been mechanisms, storage mechanisms in the past also, even today. That is, there are vsem files, isem files on mainframes, there are flat files, or there are relational databases. So what are these relational databases? SQL Server, most of you are aware of, or Sybase, which is one of the most popular databases in the financial world. And otherwise, Oracle is one of the leading relational databases. So for storage, there are databases available. Now, after storing, the next step is obviously processing the data, which is extracting the data, from the databases. It is transforming, it is reloading into either a data house or a data mart, which has got processed data. So even these steps of processing, there are tools available, tools like Informatica, Cognos, or Oracle Data Integrator. Now, after you process the data, obviously you want to see what are the results that data is showing. And to see those data from a meaningful standpoint, there are visualization tools. There are base analytics and presentation layers in the form of Tableau or WebFocus. So structured data, practically there is no problem. Then maybe you need higher infrastructure. Maybe earlier you require 10 hard drives. Now you may require 20 hard drives because the data storage has gone up. But still, the technologies that are available and are prevalent are able to handle, manage, process, and use that data as long as it is structured data. The real challenge comes in when you are trying to see the unstructured data, because the dimensions of unstructured data are completely different. And we call it as V6. There are 6 dimensions of unstructured data. And you can see them here. One is the volume, very high volumes getting added on a daily basis. We just saw that. We are all familiar with megabyte, gigabyte, terabyte, petabyte, but quintillion is probably the highest scale or a measure that today we have for measuring data volumes. And quintillion is probably 18 zeros on 1. Maybe you can also do Google and see how many zeros are there. So that is the kind of volume that is getting generated. Then the variety of data. There's no more, only numbers and alphanumeric, that is alphabets. The need to process different types of unstructured data like Facebook posts, emails, WhatsApp messages, etc., Instagram images, audio, video files. Velocity, the demand to increase the speed of computing. For example, a lot of weather data is being generated through various weather stations. Now, to identify the trends and give early warnings, you need to process data quickly. You can't say, oh, I have got some data points and it will take about a month's time to tell you whether storm is coming towards our way or it is going away. Now, if the storm is running at a speed of 500 kilometers an hour, then you need to process data in an hour and tell me that whether it is coming my way or not. Therefore, need of the velocity or the speed of processing is extremely high. The fourth dimension is veracity, that is the accuracy of the data. As long as it was structured data, I had right validations to put. But as soon as it becomes unstructured data, there is no prescribed format, then the accuracy of data can be challenged. And I'm taking a very simple example. So when you enter your date of birth in any application form, which is essentially a structured data, it clearly says that, okay, enter the date like DDMMYY or DDMONYY or DDMMYYYY. And if you don't enter the date in that format, it does not accept. So the data validation is right at the beginning when you are accepting the data. While in social media, it is not possible because the date comes in the text format, or it can come in description, or it can come in simple English. Instead, now today is 23rd, so instead of writing that, I went to a particular shopping mall on 22nd March, I will just write, that I went there yesterday. Now this yesterday need to be interpreted exactly as 22nd March. So it has to understand on what date I have written, and yesterday means it is actually 22nd March, and then therefore I need to type this date as 22/03/21. So the veracity of data creates another set of complexities. Then the value. Now the important point is, yes, everybody is saying data is oil, it has a lot of value, but what is it value? Whenever I process data, am I processing it as my hobby, or just some college assignment, or is it really giving me meaningful results? For example, social media data has a very short life, particularly if you are talking about sentiments on a particular topic. So if you give me social media data that is 2 months old, then probably the context of that data is already lost, and therefore whatever conclusions I may draw, they may not be useful at all to anybody. So there is no value that I am generating by processing the data. And lastly, the variability. Same data can be used by multiple purposes. So for example, social media data can be used to know sentiments of people. It can possibly also identify people with unusual characteristics, fraudulent mindset, or terrorist kind of mindsets, because they will keep writing in a particular tone about a particular topic. So same data can be used to know the sentiments as well as for a couple of more purposes. So these 6 new dimensions of unstructured data is really at the root of why a data science was essential. Now we saw that there is a fairly well-defined, well-developed ecosystem to handle structured data. So even over last few years, there is now an ecosystem being built to process this unstructured data, to handle this unstructured data. Now, because it is big by volume, it is also popularly known as big data. So if you hear the word big data, it's not a very technological term. It basically talks about the same thing that we talked, largely said as big because of the volume. So for big data, there are data collection mechanisms. Obviously, Google Maps creates data in the form of logs that we talked about, which is semi-structured data. Social media platforms like Facebook creates unstructured data. And then the card usage. So you may have a debit card where you withdraw amount or you pay money, or you have a credit card or a loyalty card of a particular shopping mall. All these card usage, there are mechanisms to collect the data. Now comes the database storage. We saw that there were oracles and Sybase of the world to store the structured data, but those databases are not very useful to store unstructured data because they don't store images, they don't store videos. Don't store in the sense they don't store it very effectively. They don't store audio clips. So then what is the way to do this? So it gave rise to a database technology called Hadoop. Now, Hadoop is not a relational database. It is simply expressed as rows, which has got limited data type, but has a huge capacity to store data. So the capacity to store data has been addressed by Hadoop. However, the ability to process data fast, Hadoop was not good because Hadoop still stores data on hard disk or whatever storage media. So when you are going to process large amount of data and you want to process it by speed, you need a separate kind of technology, and that is why databases like Spark came into picture. So they are very good in handling large data in the memory storage and enable speedier processing. Then came the challenge of how to process distributed data. All of us know that Googles and Facebooks of the world, they don't store data in one location. They do have data storages somewhere in Chennai, somewhere in Singapore. There is a backup creating maybe in Albany in the US. But when the data is to be processed, how do I bring that together with speed, with very low latency? Because now that the data is distributed at various places and I have to collect it at a central place to process it, it cannot take huge amount of time to transfer data from one place to another. And that gave rise to database storage mechanism or technology called Cassandra. So it solved my problem. So the memory, so what will typically happen is now the data is stored in Cassandra. It will brought into Spark because I want to process it speedily. But that is only from the database storage side. What about the programming languages to actually program this and process this? And that is where it gave rise to different programming languages. You are mostly aware about Python probably, and some of you may be even aware of Hive. But there are 4 key languages in big data technology. Pig is the first one, which is parallel processing, which is meant for parallel processing. So what it means is it will run the same algorithm at different instances. So if I do a combination of Cassandra and Pig, what happens is, let us say my credit card data is stored in Chennai, while your credit card data is stored in Singapore. The algorithm to process this data is same. Now the Java doesn't help me to process this data because it will need that data to come in a very sequential format. So what happens with Pig is one instance where the same algorithm runs in the Singapore instance and also in Chennai at the same time. And finally, a summary of data is transmitted, over the low latency network, and we get the results. So that is how combination of Cassandra and Pig is used. While Python is, known for its libraries, known as, Panda is one of the set of libraries. Ready-made. So what is the library? It is a ready-made package of certain functionality, saving your programming time. And to give you a very simple example, all of us wanted to calculate number of days between 2 dates. Now, when there was no Excel and there were no other languages, we will do the program writing by first principle, right? So convert the date into Gregorian date, consider if it is a leap year, and then calculate the number of days. While Python as a language provides this kind of ready function. So it may provide, and I'm just giving an example, it's not a syntax from Python, that the function may be char day, and then for char day, as a function, you pass 2 parameters, start date and end date, and it will give you an output of number of days. So you don't write any program, you just call that function and say call char day, date A, comma date B, comma variable for storing days. That's all you do. So that's how the Python made your programming stuff fairly easy. While that was not enough, Hive was required to manage the distributed databases. So we saw Cassandra, which is a good distributed database or data storage, but it needs a separate language to manage the databases, and that is why Hive came into picture. And finally, Kafka came into picture to handle or process the logs that we talked about, the semi-structured data. Particularly, it can handle real-time feeds. So, for example, we heard you heard from me that jet engine is generating data. Now, imagine that this jet engine is generating data and sending it over to a processing unit, and the processing unit is expected to tell them whether the jet engine is in line with its course. Is it likely to have any problems on the route? You need to constantly receive the data and constantly process it in a real-time feed. And that's why a language kind of Kafka was developed. Or similar nature, you heard about the online transactions being generated by stock exchanges, where constantly the stock prices are being fed, and there is something called as algorithmic trading. So there is no human intervention. These real-time feeds go to an algorithm, and those algorithms actually make a decision in terms of which share to buy, how much quantity to buy, and at what price to buy. So for such kind of functionalities, language like Kafka is very useful. And finally, once you have stored the data, processed the data in an effective manner, you need to see the visualization. You need to see the data in a proper format to have some meaningful conclusion. And for that, now there are tools like Fusion Charts or Google Charts, which are more, developed particularly to handle the data process through big data technologies. Now we saw that what was the technology set for processing structured data, vis-a-vis why big data came in, what are the characteristics of big data, and how these technologies handle big data. So I'll take a pause here for a minute. Any questions so far? Because now we are, kind of switching our gear more towards data science. Any questions so far? Okay.
Hello. Hello.
How many of, yeah, please. Yes.
Sir, is there open source pig and all these thing softwares are available, or these are paid?
Yeah, so open source is actually not a language. Open source
Okay.
is a content, is a, I would say, a library. So in our conventional one, it is like library of books. So open source is a library of code. So you
Okay.
have certain functions, you have certain code bases. And the why it is called as open source, in a conventional library, you can't take away the book. You read the book and you return it.
Written.
While in open source, you can take the source and keep it with you. You can modify it and use it in your application. Like in a library book, you can't tear off some of the pages, and when you want to write a book, you can't tear off certain pages and put it as part of your book. Because you don't have the copyright. Here you can use software to modify and have it readily available. Sometimes the obligation is whatever you develop using open source, you also have to give it back so that others can use it. Okay.
Yes.
So how many of, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, please. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
How many of you understand Devanagari script, what you are seeing on the screen? Anybody who doesn't understand the script itself? You can raise your hand or unmute your mic and say. Okay, anyway, I'm going to explain this in English. So those who may not understand the script. See, Ravi is sun, Dekhe means see. Jena Dekhe Ravi, Te Dekhe Kavi means we believe that sun can see everything because it is overarching over the world. However, what sun can see is only what exists on the earth. Sun cannot see things that don't exist. While Kavi, that is a poet, through his imagination, through his visualization capabilities, he can say things that even the sun cannot see because he visualizes, he imagines. This is a English meaning of the script I have written here. So what is the significance in data science? The data scientist is like a poet. He will see things and show you things that a common man cannot see. And a common man is Ravi, which is quite visible to us, visible to our eyes, to our senses. And you may not believe me, but I will show you a simple test now. Can you all see the numbers here? Right? 73, 76, 79, 86, 69, 89, 79, and 85. What are these numbers telling you? What are your observations from this number? And I have now, unfortunately, this is not a discussion that we can have in person, but if anybody can tell me what are you seeing in these numbers? Anybody? I mean, some people said, yeah, all numbers are more than 65 and less than 100, like that. Can anybody tell me any more observations on this data? So some people said, look, there are only 2 even numbers and rest are all odd numbers, etc. However, when I gave this to a data scientist, he said these numbers mean I love you. Can you believe this? Now I will tell you why. These 73, 76, 79, these are nothing but ASCII codes of the English alphabets ILOVEYOU. You can go and check your ASCII chart. Now, why this was possible for a data scientist and not possible for us? Because there are algorithms that will help the data scientist to find out the patterns. What I just showed you is a pattern that every alphabet, every number represents an alphabet. So this is the power of data scientists, that common things that are visible to us. And I told you some of the observations. Somebody said, yeah, more than 65, less than 100. Somebody said it started with odd number, ended with odd number, and so on and so forth. Right. Very similarly, data scientists also found out the power of data. Now you see this example. Now this is a real life example. And this is called as a real shocking, interesting conclusion what data scientists have given. What they are saying, again, this is a news article in Maharashtra Times, and it is in Marathi, so I will translate it for you. What it is saying, that increase in sale of lipstick is an indication that there is a financial recession is likely to follow. Can you, or would you in your dreams would have imagined that there is a connection between the financial recession and sale of lipstick? And now it is proven by data science over a period of last 100 years of data that whenever there was a financial recession, before the financial recession, the lipstick sale has gone up. And that's why it is also popularly known as lipstick index in the financial world. Now you tell me, if I have given you data of, let us say, 1,000 stores in the world which sell cosmetics, would you have ever imagined that there is a connection between this and this? Now you may ask me, no, but what is the logic? Now the purpose of data scientist is not to find logic. The purpose of data scientist is to find relation so that you are able to predict. So now let's say 10 years down the line, you see and you keep watching the lipstick sale. If you see that there is an uptick in the lipstick sale, then probably down the line you are expecting a financial recession. So this is the reason why data science has becoming more and more popular and more useful for the policymakers, for the consumers, for the manufacturers, because then they can make their financial decisions accordingly. So if I know that there is a financial recession likely to come 6 months down the line, I will change my production strategy. I will not produce in masses. I will try and control my stocks. I will try and finish and sell all my stocks on my hand, because I know 6 or 9 months down the line, the demand is going to go down. So this is the power of data science, and that's why I had written that Dena Dekhe Ravi Te Dekhe Kavi, is because none of us could really see from that transaction that there is likely to be any connection between sale of lipstick and the financial recession. In the introduction, you heard that data science and it's a multidisciplinary field. Yes, it is a multidisciplinary field. So what is data science? One, it is a multidisciplinary field. Two, it processes structured and unstructured data, and we saw what it is. We also saw that under the big data technology, it is able to process huge volumes data. We also saw through an example that it uses scientific methods, processes, and algorithms to process the data. And this is very important, and because we also need to understand what is not a data science. But for anything to be called as a data science, there has to be a scientific method, a process, and set of algorithms to be used. And for what purpose? It will draw insights of customer behavior by analyzing, predicting, and finding trends. So that is what is data science all about. the first bullet point says it is multidisciplinary. So let us understand why it is multidisciplinary. Now today, most of us are branded like, oh, he is a computer science graduate, or he is MSc mathematics, or he is MBA finance and banking. So all these people, they are bucketed or they are working in isolation because of their specialized knowledge. And we have created those walls or boundaries around their knowledge. While you are familiar with the Venn diagram concept, a data science requires all these three facets or all these three knowledge bases that are otherwise taught to you separately. So a computer science graduate will be expert in Python and RStudio and RDBMS like Oracle or database like Hadoop. He will process banking transaction, but he doesn't know what is a credit card life cycle transaction, which means when you swipe a credit card or a debit card, you don't know what happens behind and how your amount gets debited to you and credited to where you are paying the bills. Now, to know that, you need to understand how banking systems work or how retail or fast moving consumer goods work. So data scientist is somebody who needs to understand all these three. He also needs to understand the statistical algorithms like random forest, regression tree, decision trees. So he needs to understand which of the available algorithm like random forest or decision tree can be best used to process the data generated by banking business using Python or RStudio. And that is why data science is known as multidisciplinary. Otherwise, you have your own disciplines anyway, that you are a computer science graduate and you are a mathematics graduate and you are a banking graduate and so on. Now, having said that, what is data science? It is also important to know what is not a data science. I don't know how many of you have experienced this, but a few years back in the football World Cup matches, this Paul Octopus was very famous. And he was supposed to give accurate predictions of the result of a football match. And I think the accuracy was close to 80-85%. Now, this octopus was also giving predictions of the match and they were coming correct. Now, does it mean it is a data science? No, it does not. Because first of all, nobody knows how octopus did that. Was it, it did not use any data. There was no model, there was no algorithm. So data science basic needs it should have a data at the base and it should have algorithms to process. Otherwise, you know, even the guy who comes at your door with a parrot in the box, who takes out some parrot cards and gives you your prediction of what is likely to happen in your world. Now he also predicts your future. He also tells you a few things, but that doesn't mean, you know, he's a data scientist. You know, because he is not processing any data, there is no algorithm with him. So we have to be very clear in our understanding of what constitutes a data science. Now let us look at, you know, how exactly it is done. So there is a standard process by which data scientists operate and use this data to process the data meaningfully. So first they have a raw data, and it could be a banking transaction, credit card transactions, it could be video films, it could be any data, and they try and apply standard models or algorithms. If they believe that those models or algorithms are not giving them the right results, they may write their own algorithms. But basically these models or algorithms gives you insights of what this data is trying to tell you. Then the MBA kind of a knowledge applies the business context to these insights and say, okay, if this is what the data is telling me, let me take certain actions to increase my revenue or my profit. And you saw that why data is important, because enterprises want to increase profit and increase revenue. So the manager, the MBA guy will say, okay, if this is the case, then you do this. So it defines a strategy and also tells you that if you do ABCD, you will get this outcome. Either your profit will go up by 10% or your revenue will increase by 50% or whatever. Then next thing is the business executes the strategy or implement the strategy and measure the actual outcome, that whether really my profit has gone up by 10%, has my revenue really gone up by 50%. So it compares the expected outcome that was given by the business context or my business manager and the actual outcome, and then decides whether the data strategy is successful, the data science is useful, or was it not useful at all, or it is we are very close, we need to tweak a few things here and there, and then we will be successful. So these are the 4 key steps of how data science is used in practice. Now let me take a pause before we move to our next session, which is about the applications of data science. So I'm open to any questions that you may have. Any questions? You can unmute yourself and ask me questions.
Dear participants, if you have any question, you can ask your question just by unmuting yourself, or you can either post your question in chat box also. I'll read on behalf of you.
Okay. So we can have one more opportunity to have questions once we finish the application part.
Okay.
Let us look at the applications of data science, right? So where is it used? Practically in every walk of our life, data science is being used for various reasons. So if you look at the travel, which is the first aspect, they are trying to use dynamic pricing model, and I will explain to you what is dynamic pricing. But in travel, they are using dynamic pricing. Or in healthcare, they are trying to use it for disease prediction, medication effectiveness. All of us hear about this vaccine's efficacy is 70%, that is 85%. Or if you take it after 8 weeks, it is 70%. If you take it after 12 weeks, it is 90%. This all is done by the data scientists. So they process data of people who have taken vaccines at different point of time and the effectiveness in terms of their antibodies generated by the body. Then there are areas like sales, where your different offers are prepared, discounting mechanisms are prepared, demand forecasting is done. Or in terms of credit and insurance, there is a fraud detection, particularly in the credit card business. And we will see some of the examples of how fraud is detected. Then in the area of automation, where logs are processed, particularly self-driving cars or pilotless aircrafts, which constantly keep sending data, which is monitored at the central level at the ATC. ATC is the air traffic controller. Then there are social media. Obviously, all of us know about social media, how it is used for digital marketing, how it is used for sentiment analysis, and so on. So let us look at a few use cases which we talked about just now. But before that, I want to tell you that there is a huge investment that is required to process or to apply any data science mechanism in your business, because you need super heavy processing infrastructure, you need strong algorithms, you need fast computing mechanisms to give you real benefit of data science. Now, before investing into this data science exercise, every business tries to use this acid test to see whether this exercise is going to help me to either acquire new customers or cross-sell my products or upsell my product. So cross-sell means if I have bought a fridge, can this customer buy a washing machine, or can he buy a dishwasher? And upsell means if this guy has bought a two-wheeler, will I be able to sell four-wheeler to him? That is called as upsell. So basic purpose of application of data science from a business standpoint is to see whether I can increase my customer base, Or can I increase my profit by reducing costs and avoiding wastage? Or can I increase my customer loyalty? And we will see, how these happen by taking various use cases. So first use case I want to take is Ola, because many of you will be familiar with this service. And I've just taken name of Ola, but it could be Uber or it could be any such taxi service provider. Now, how they are using this Ola for dynamic pricing, which is one of the objectives that you heard in the travel industry, and how they increase revenue and profit by analyzing the customer behavior. Now, Ola uses fairly straightforward structured data. So what is the structured data that Ola uses? Typically, when you book a taxi, what happens? You have to give a starting point, you have to give a destination, and then you say, at what time you want to travel. So you have your telephone number, that is mobile number, your start time, your starting point, your destination, and then Ola tells you a price. It gives a price estimate. So for example, if let's say I live in area called Kothurud in Pune and I go for my job to Hinjawadi. Now Hinjawadi being far away, about 20 to 23 kilometers, fairly heavy on traffic, I normally prefer Ola. So on a Monday morning, I book a ride, let's say at 8:30, and I want to start by 8:45 so that I can reach my office by about 9:30. So, 22 kilometers, Ola with their standard pricing model tells me that estimated price is 300 rupees. I'm happy that I know this is how it normally costs. So I accept the offer and book the cab. Again, next day, maybe about 8:29 or 8:31, I book, same story happens. I start at 8:45, reach by 9:30. So Ola is storing all that. Starting point, starting time, ending point, the price that I preferred, mobile number, this, that, etc. Fairly structured data. Wednesday also same thing happens. Comes Thursday, I again try to do book the taxi. Ola gives me a price estimate of 310 rupees. And I say, okay, not much difference between 300, 310. Okay, anyway, I have to go to office. Because 10 rupees over a base of 300, I don't mind it. It's about 3%. Now imagine that Ola has the same cost for the same ride, but it has drawn 10 rupees extra from me. So it has increased the revenue, it has increased my profit, it has increased its profit. Now they also know that I am a guy who is okay with 310. So Friday also they will show me estimated price to be 310. So in 2 days, they actually increased their revenue by 20 rupees. And because it is anyway, they were making some profit in the base 300 rupee price, this all goes as a profit. Assuming that in a 300 rupee profit, in 300 rupee sale price, they were doing 30 rupees as a profit. Imagine that, they made 40 rupees as a profit on a particular day. So profit has gone up on that ride by 33%. This is how it happens. It doesn't stop here. They know that I'm willing to pay 310 rupees. So coming Monday, they charge me 325 rupees. Now, my thinking is, oh, it seems to be Monday, very busy day. All of us are going to work, or some people who go back home on the weekend, they are also coming. So almost everybody will charge me the same price or more traffic. So I okay 325 as well. Now 325 becomes my new benchmark. Next 2-3 days, they charge me 325. So now if you see, in 7 days of or 8 days of my ride, they have added their profit 20 rupees in the first week, 75 rupees in the first 3 days of my ride. So almost 90 rupees of extra profit they have booked against me, just because by doing the behavior analysis, how I behave. Now on next Thursday, they try and do a 335 rupees as my estimate. Now I'm alarmed. I'm not happy with 335. So I decline the offer and I say, okay, let me try Uber. These guys are costing me more. Even that transaction is recorded that at 335, this guy has refused to take a ride. So now they know that the price elasticity or price band that I have is 300 to 325. But in the process, they have already pocketed 90 rupees extra in a span of 7 to 10 days. This is how the data science at the back keeps telling them the customer behavior, my behavior. Now, this is a very specific individual customer behavior. If you are there, you may say, okay, 335 is also fine. Anyway, I'm already late. I don't have time to book another cab ride. So let me go for 335. So they will say, oh, this guy's price elasticity is 300 to 335. While somebody even at 310 may refuse to take a ride and say, you know what is this? You know, yesterday it was 300, today 310. I don't want to take the price. So they try and use this dynamic pricing, which is not fixed for anybody, which keeps changing person to person, time to time, and try to get more revenue, more profit. They don't stop here. As soon as they know that I refuse the ride, they realize that 335 is not the price that I liked. Now, because I have refused the ride, they can't do much about it. But tomorrow morning, suddenly you will get a pop-up on your Ola saying that 30 rupees off onto your next ride. And then you try and book, they will still show you 300 rupees as a price. You are happy that you got that price. On top of that, you got 300 rupees off. So you believe that, oh, look, I'm making profit. Now I'm doing this ride of 270 rupees. But in reality, they are actually returning you the 30 rupees that they have over earned from you to keep loyalty towards Ola. And this is how you have seen that they try and see whether the data science exercises help me to make my customers more loyal. So I don't book any other ride next day and I go back to Ola. This is a classic example of how data science is used at the back to understand customer behavior and to do a dynamic pricing. Now the next case is trying to find anomaly detection. See, most of us have been, class monitors sometime or other, either fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, or wherever. What is the function of a class monitor? Is exactly same, anomaly detection. What does the class teacher tell you? So look, Vinay, you are a class monitor. So you have to tell me if somebody comes late in the class. You have to note it down. Or if somebody is misbehaving, you note it down and report it to me. So what you are trying to do? You are trying to find an anomaly compared to a common behavior. Common behavior is you come in, if your school starts at 9 o'clock, you come in at 9 o'clock. What is anomalous behavior? You come at 10 past 9 or 15 past 9. Now this was possible because the class was of only for 50 people. So just by observation, you could do that, and you have to do it only for first 15 or 20 minutes, because after that anyway the school door closes. So your data set was very small, only 50 people, 50 students, and your time zone was also small, only 15-20 minutes of attention was required. But you were still doing anomaly detection. Now imagine that this is a picture of a bank branch, and you will see that a person sitting there, and I have put a circle around him. Now there is a video camera that is, obviously CCTV camera recording, the happenings in the branch, and it is also getting processed at the back. And the normal behavior of any person in the bank is he will come in the branch, do some transactions or go to some desk, have a chat with somebody, finish his business transaction and go off. So generally in 10-15 minutes, the possible customer will go away. While the video processing of this branch at the back end raises an alarm saying that the person sitting here has not moved for last 15 minutes. He just came in, sat here, which is an unusual behavior, which is an anomalous behavior. So there are two possibilities. One is he is a potentially unhappy customer because he is expecting somebody from the branch officials to attend to him and he is not getting attended. So he's just waiting there. Or he doesn't have actually any banking business to do, but he is a potentially fraudulent customer. So he may want to run away with cash, or he may want to attack somebody, or some fraudulent or malicious intention the customer may have. So once this message is created by the data processing system, it goes to the surveillance or the security guy that please keep a watch. Now, being a bank customer, you cannot take immediate action, but you actually keep a watch on the customer. And you also send a message to the branch manager that apparently there is a customer which is not attended for a long time. So please go and figure out what he or she wants. So either way, you are attending him to increase the loyalty of the customer. He know that he got attention finally, or by looking at by attending him and asking him what he wants to do, you want to avoid a potential damage either to the property or to the cash or to any other malicious intentions you are trying to prevent. So this is how now unstructured data is processed to detect anomaly to one, ensure that you avoid a potentially unhappy customer and also avoid a potential fraudulent customer. The other use case, which is also you may be also familiar with, is the customer behavior tracking, particularly during the airline reservation processing system. So normally, what do you do when you book an airline ticket? You go to various websites, you find out, you compare prices, and then you figure out which airline you want to travel. And how do you do? You basically make sure that you have the right flight, maybe direct flight in your time zone, and probably the most economical flight. Let's say you get one such airline which tells you that your ticket for Pune to Hyderabad on 9th October is costing you say 3,500 rupees. So you go there, you fill all the details, and then you come to an option where it says now you have put in all the details, you pay the bill, you pay the money. So when you click on the pay option, suddenly you get a message, oops, the price has gone up. Now you may think that this is an accident, or you even may not understand why this is happening. But this is not happening as an accident. This is a purposeful act of the airline. So what are they doing at the back end? They are collecting all the information of your browsing history, that when you started booking your ticket. So the cookies at the back end remember the websites you visited. It confirms that now you are a serious ticket buyer, or you are serious about your travel. So they offer you a price to attract you. They also know what are the prevailing prices, and maybe the prevailing price was 4,000 rupees, which was the other lowest price. So they offered you 3,500 to hook you into their particular airline. And now that they know that you have come to a point of payment, they're trying to test your behavior and say, sorry, the price has gone up by 200 rupees or 250 rupees. So your price becomes 3,750 instead of 3,500. What does this mean? They first created an attractive price for you, but they had never any intentions of selling it to you. If you refuse it, they're okay. But now you believe that you have done so much of research, and everything is so close. I don't want to enter the details again, which is the exact behavior tracking that they do. And then you basically buy at 3,750, which is probably only marginally lower than what you would have otherwise got. So this is how dynamic pricing is also used by tracking the customer behavior. So finally, what happened? They increased their revenue by roughly about 300 rupees. So if you look at, they were offering you 3,500 and you finally ended up paying 3,800. So 300 rupees more over a base price of 3,500, which means almost 9% extra revenue and extra profit. That is why they keep these data processing engines at the back running constantly. Now we saw anomaly detection in unstructured data through this banking use case. I have a personal experience of how anomaly detection happens in the credit card business. Just to tell you that the context of this anomaly detection is the credit card industry overall spends about $2 billion or loses $2 billion for fraudulent transactions. How fraudulent transaction happens? Either by misauthentication, stolen cards, etc. But as you know that once the card is swiped and the transaction is approved, the card company is liable to pay whether it is fraudulent or clean transaction. So the card issuing companies like the Citibank or ICICI or any other credit card issuing bank wants to avoid these fraudulent transactions before they are approved. So my personal experience has been in 2005, not 2005, in about 2014, I went to Johannesburg in South Africa, and I was trying to pay my hotel bill in advance when I was checking in, and it was about 9 p.m. in the night. Johannesburg is a fairly, there are areas which are fairly shady and risky to move around in the night because there are a lot of mugging cases that happen. Now I swiped my Citibank card for roughly about $4,500, and the transaction was declined. So I was surprised because I have been using this card probably for about 25 years across various countries, across various currencies. And this currency was Rand. This is the South African currency known as Rand. Equivalent dollar amount was 4,500. But I was surprised because never before my credit card transaction was declined. And I was about to withdraw about to take out my HSBC card and try and see whether I face the same problem. I got a call from India saying they're calling from Citibank call center, and they realized that my card is being swiped in Johannesburg at night for a significantly large amount. So I said, look, I've been using this card, so why now? I've used this in Dubai, I've used it in US, I've used this in Greece. Why now? So they said, look, in our databases, two things have happened. One is Johannesburg is a blacklisted city. So any transactions we are extremely careful. And we looked at your 25-year history of credit card usage, and you have never used this card for Rand currency, and that too so late in the night. So we thought this was an anomalous transaction compared to your standard customer behavior. Now, fortunately, this was a valid transaction, so they, ensured my identity and they cleared the transaction. But if this was not a clean transaction, they would have potentially avoided. The reason I'm giving you this example is this is how they do fraud detection by having my 25 years data. Now imagine the speed of processing. They have processed, so they have not stored my data at, because my individual data may be 10,000 transactions in 25 years, not a big deal to process. But just imagine that they have my 25 years data stored in different databases, along with so many millions of customers and transactions. But instantly they could say, oh, look, this is an unusual or anomalous transaction. And that is the power of data science and data science technologies. Now you have seen that I showed you how data science is used. Now that time you probably just have heard me, but let me tell you in reality how this process of 4 steps works. So let us first look at step number 1, the raw data processing. Now this is a use case, it's a real life use case. There is a chain of grocery shops in the US, fairly large, probably in top 3 in the US. Now what they have done, they obviously have, for security reasons, CCTV cameras at the entrance of this grocery shop, which is what you see as a photograph, on the left top corner. Now this video and the images captured in that are processed by the algorithms, and the insight that this processing gave that 85% of the men, when they enter store, they take a left turn. So you have, aisles and, shopping items on both left and right, while 85% men, for whatever reason, they start from the left. So this is one insight that the algorithm has given. Then, when the main checkout with the purchase goods, they pay the bill by card. So they have these card data, which is fairly structured. So they also know that the men who are buying products are not particular about the expiry date of the product. Now, how do they draw this conclusion? Because they have data of what has been bought, what was the gender of the buyer, what was the product code, what was the product expiry date. And this they kind of found out that most of the men, when they buy product, they are not very particular about expiry date. So if they are buying milk, expiry date may be tomorrow, or if they are buying product, expiry date may be bread, expiry date may be day after tomorrow. And that means that you have to finish or consume that product before the expiry date. And in the US, if you keep a product with expiry with a product that has expired, you have huge penalties. So obviously, you have to take those products off the shelf, which is a complete waste. Now see that there are two insights the data science has given. One is 85% of the men entering the store turn left, and men buying products are not particular about the expiry dates. So this is the insight given by data science. Let us go back to our process. So we have covered the first step. It says, great, I have got the insights, but what do I do with the insight? So the store manager says, okay, now let us apply the business context. What is the business context? That there is a strategy that the products which are expiring either today or tomorrow, let us keep all such products on the left. So you may have two racks, one on the left which has got milk expiring today or tomorrow, and one milk rack which is on the right, which maybe the expiry date is 5 days from now. But store all such products on the left, so that when men enter, they will pick up the product which are expiring soon, and we will not have to throw those products out. So that is the business context that the data scientist or the business manager applied. By applying this, which is the strategy that we talked about, they saw that the reduced wastage by roughly about 10 to 11%. The stocks that should have been actually thrown out because they were not sold before expiry, they were purchased by men despite their expiry date coming soon. That actually reduced the wastage of this particular grocery chain and increased profit. And this is not a small amount. This grocery store, which is probably one of the top 3 in the US, saved about $300 million. $1 million in today's context is 7.5 crore rupees. So imagine the kind of profit they were able to generate by reducing the wastage. So this is how powerful the data scientist and the insight that he gives works well if the business is able to apply a right strategy to the insight that has been drawn. One more purpose for which data science is used is called sentiment analysis. Now, the typical old method was surveying, and even in certain cases it still appears, but in a little modified form. But surveying means, there is a questionnaire, and that questionnaire is sent to respondents. They will fill the questionnaire either on paper or digitally, and then it comes for processing. If it is entered manually, if it is filled in manually, then you have to enter that data, process that data, and then find out what the customer is saying or what is the sentiment of a particular locality or a group of people. Now this is a fairly time consuming process. So today with the capabilities of data science, one is people are now conducting online survey. So at least your ability to or your need to go from door to door, fill up the form, etc. is gone. People can directly fill online, but still it is somebody has to take an effort of filling the online form. And all of us know we get so many requests to fill in so many survey forms that most of the times we don't encourage such things. So what data scientists have done, they have picked up these unstructured data from Facebook posts, from Instagrams, from WhatsApp chats and emails, and using the machine learning and NLP, which is natural language processing capabilities built in data science, they come out with quick sentiment analysis. And all of you probably have heard or must have seen on the TV that a lot of TV shows show this kind of sentiment that, okay, you take the farmers agitation in New Delhi, what is happening today? Now, how is this possible? They are not going to go to farmers and ask them to fill up the questionnaire and process data. They read the Facebook wall data and process that data to figure out what is the rest of the world thinking about this farmer agitation, and then they publish that result. And as you know, most commonly it is used in election predictions. They don't go and ask everybody, whom do you think will be the next PM or the next party in power. They collect this data. Most of the time, the WhatsApp data keeps talking about your own sentiment, and that data is processed to give your election predictions. So these are the set of applications, that are basically where data science is used. I want to give you one more example, and you being students and you understand the technology well. I'm going or giving a little more technical flavor to this use case. Now, this use case is about predicting bad loans. You know that in the Indian banking industry, what is known as NPA, non-productive assets, means bad loans. And we know the cases, big cases of bad loans in form of Mr. Mallya or Mr. Nirav Modi and so on. So all the effort that banks are doing is, can I predict whether this loan is going to be risky or not? Will this guy, because the loan 10 years are long, 5-year, 10-year, 15-year, 20-year, nobody knows what will happen in 20 years. So will I be able to predict whether this guy will return all my money or not? Now, how do we do that? There is a standard work process or a process workflow. And this uses actually the algorithms, various algorithms, to figure out based on my existing data set. So I have already given, let us say, 30,000 loans, and I know which loans have turned out bad. So I give all this data, not knowing whether there is any relation between the parameters on which the loan was sanctioned, the characteristics of the individual, etc., etc. But I still want to predict whether the next loan is going to be good or bad. So I try to find out or explore what are the different parameters that are likely to impact what we called in technical terms as target variable. So my target variable is the result. So what we do, we pick up a model, a statistical model or a regression model or a statistical algorithm, and give all the parameters. Let's say there are 100 parameters, name of the borrower, the locality he stays, age, company he works with, his salary, loan amount, rate of interest, premium, financial charges, purpose of loan, and there are thousands of things that are available about a loan. So we give all that loan data of 30,000 people, along with whether it turned out to be a good loan or bad loan, and try to use algorithms to figure out of these 1,000 data elements, which data elements are most significant to predict whether the loan is going to be good or bad. So what we did, we use different algorithms, right? So you see there on the top, on the right hand side, in the table, there are various algorithms that we use. So chi-square, random forest, etc. And each of these algorithms, based on this logic in the algorithm, came out with about 12 variables that are potentially important to decide whether a particular loan will turn out to be good or bad. Now, obviously, because algorithms operate differently, operate on different statistical techniques, they came out with their scores for each parameter. So, for example, if you look at chi-square said, okay, income is important, annual income of the borrowers is important. So if you see, almost every algorithm that we tried said yes, except the L1 algorithm, that annual income is one of the parameters that will decide whether your loan is going to be good or bad. So out of the 6 algorithms we used, 5 said yes, annual income is a parameter. So we added up to get the final score to see that what are the parameters which are scoring maximum from all these 6 algorithms. And then when we saw that, look, for example, if you look at the interest rate, parameter number 7, all algorithms said interest rate is one of the key parameters to decide whether loan is good or bad. Now, if you really look at all these parameters are quite logical. So it is very easy to understand. If your income is low, obviously you will not be able to repay the loan. Or if your interest rate is high, there will be difficulties in repaying the loan. So this is the exercise that we did. So we now have trained the model. This is called as training the model to see that, okay, these are the 12 parameters to be on the watch. So next time when I want to predict whether the loan is good or bad, I will focus on these 12 parameters. So it is not focusing, for example, on the age of the borrower. It doesn't matter at what age you are taking the loan, because otherwise it would have appeared in the index, which beats my common sense. I personally thought maybe the earlier the borrower takes the loan in his age, he is a good borrower because he has longer time. But data doesn't show that. You could be of any age, you could be either a good loan borrower or a bad loan borrower. So this is how machine learning or artificial intelligence is used in the data science world to predict whether a particular event is likely to happen or not. And you will understand, you would have heard the terms called supervised learning, unsupervised learning. So this is a case of supervised learning, that I am teaching the model to understand which parameters are important, and then using the same set of parameters I'm going to use to predict what is likely to happen. So this is where the applications are there, and so this closes my presentation part. Now I am opening the session for any questions.
Okay. So there are 2 questions in chat box.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Let me look at the chat box.
One student is asking about which skills are required in data scientist.
Yeah. So the skills that you saw, it's a multidisciplinary set. You need computer programming as a skill, particularly Python, RStudio. You need skills in statistics because you need to understand the statistical model, and you need a domain knowledge like a typical MBA does, how banking transactions work, how credit card works, or how the retail business works. Now this is if you want to be a data scientist, because the data scientist is the one who is at the apex, and he basically gives you insight. He also tells you the strategy, also helps you to implement strategy. Having said that, if you have limited skills, there is still a role to play, but it will not be a data scientist. Then it will be maybe a data engineer. So if you are a computer science graduate, you are able to extract, transform, and load data into data warehouse. You are able to just run the algorithm without knowing what the algorithm is. You can still be a data engineer, but not a data scientist. So based on your skill set, you can play multiple roles. There are multiple roles in the data science world, but for a data scientist, you need all the 3 discipline skills.
Okay, fine. One more question is there, sir. Sir, can you tell your experience and project you have done till now in the data science? You can explain one of the project which is related to data science they are asking.
Right. So the last one that you saw is a real project that we have done using the data science mechanism, and that's why I gave you that example. Other examples, I did not go into the technical part, but they were touching your real life, so to help you understand how data science helps you in real life. But the last project that I gave you, predicting the status of loan, whether it is going to be good loan or bad loan, is the real project. and you saw some glimpses that we processed 30,000 loan cases. We ran 6 algorithms to find out which parameters are important. Then we saw also the total score against each parameter, and finally decided, based on the scores, which are the top 5 or 10 parameters that decide whether the loan is going to be turning out to be good or bad. So that is one project, that I explained to you that we did very recently.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Sir, there is one more question from student side I'm asking to you.
Yeah.
As participants are from electronics and computer both background, so can you suggest which skill students should acquire at this level so that they can work in the field of data science and as a data engineer? Which skills they should acquire to start the
So
career?
for a data engineer, your basic programming skills is the base, and on top of that, there are tools. Particularly, the data engineer does the role of we call it as ETL, extract, transform, and load. That is, extracting data from various systems, loading into a data warehouse or a data mart, and for that you need to understand how the tools work. There are a lot of ETL tools available like Informatica, Cognos, or Oracle Data Presenter, and so on. So those tools that you saw in my earlier slide in the first session, those are the tools that you should learn. You should have hands-on experience on those tools. Or if you are a good front-end guy, then you should look at tools that are called as visualization layer tools. So tools like WebFocus or Tableau or Google Chart. You should gain expertise in those areas. So you will not restrict yourself only to the ETL layer or ETL process of data science, but also contribute toward the visualization layer.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Dear participants, do you have any question? If you have any question, you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
All right. If there are no more questions, I think the time is also up, and I would like to thank, as a concluding message, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me and to give me opportunity to talk to students and give my views on data science. So thank you so much, for this session, and wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, sir, for guiding all of us regarding data science, and the elaborative examples that you have given during the session will surely help all the students to understand data science more clearly. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, and bye-bye.
Yes.